Hello, it is time for our devotional again today. Hope you're having a good day wherever you're at today. We're just looking at Proverbs chapter 5, verse 7. And so I'm going to read it and then we're just going to dive right in. So it says, "Now then, my sons, listen to me and do not depart from the words of my mouth." Now, if you've been following this series, you'll recognize this phrase. In Proverbs, this phrase reoccurs, or a variation of this phrase reoccurs many times. And I think this is like the eighth time or something in the first five chapters. But it's a key phrase that's meant to emphasize itself, and so we should never allow ourselves to completely breeze over these repeated statements. They're repeated in order to emphasize them. And so here it is again. I'm going to do a little devotional from a little different angle than I've done before, but the similar thought is there again. Pay attention, listen to the words of wisdom, pay attention, don't go and stray away from them. Pay attention. And that's the idea. Don't stray from it. And it just repeats it to emphasize it. And it's so important that we realize the need to do this. We can't grow in our lives and in our persons and in our character. We can't grow if we don't pay attention. If we're not determined and intentional about our growth, then we won't really grow. We'll be more like a wild plant that grows and just doesn't really prosper or doesn't really bear fruit, as the Bible uses this idea. And so we need to be intentional and we need to be deliberate and consistent and persevere in it and so on. This phrase also marks little sections within the early chapters of Proverbs. It marks little sections of thought. Chapter 5 is talking a lot about our commitment to the good and our commitment in marriage in particular. But here in these few verses around verse 7, there's a little section that's going to talk about, well, it's going to talk a lot about regret and things, and we'll see that over the next few verses as we do them in the future. But so it's a little section, so it's highlighting that again. But what I want to kind of just encourage you with today to think about is the idea that we use this idea in our day and age of ignorance isn't an excuse for breaking the law. We'll say, if the law says you're not to do this or whatever, you can't say, well, I didn't know that was the law. No judge in at least in my country, no judge will let you off the hook because you didn't know that was the law. That's not the way it works. Ignorance is an excuse for breaking the law. Well, with God, there is no excuse for ignorance itself. When it comes to the law of God or to the ways of God and wisdom of God, He's not going to say that you're ignorant and that's okay. He's going to say there's no excuse for ignorance itself. God has, and here's why. God has placed a sense of morality in every human being. We have a sense of it. And that's God letting you know there is such a thing. And so once you know there is such a thing, there is an obligation to learn it, to know what it is. If you sense that there is a right and a wrong, then you need to find the right. And so God builds that right in humans to pursue and find right and wrong. Now, we will do it very badly. We are fallen creatures. We make all kinds of mistakes, and we don't always find morality as it's supposed to be. We seek our own version of it. But there is at least the sense of it. And so God puts that in you to draw you in. So there's that. But then God also offers to teach you wisdom if you'll ask for it, if you'll come to Him for it. Then He'll teach you wisdom. He'll teach you morality. He'll teach you right and wrong and good and how to be a good person. And so that's offered by God to all humans. Is if humans will turn to God and seek His wisdom, He will give it. But then more than that, God also has sent out messengers and witnesses into the world, people to preach and teach the gospel and to teach the ways of God. He's a called and anointed people to go out and do this. And so these people testify of the ways of God. That's sent out into the world. And then on top of that, He's also made available the scriptures that we're studying. He's made those available to our world. We're very blessed to have them available to us. Not all times and places have had them available, and that even today, not everybody in the world has access to the scriptures. But for those of us that do, God has made that access available to us. So we're really without excuse. But at the center of all that, we have, as the Bible teaches us, we have nature itself. declaring God's ways so that we are without excuse, as Paul the Apostle wrote it. And so there's no real excuse for saying, well, I didn't know any better. Well, you didn't maybe know everything you needed to know, but you were given access to the one who can make you know. And so we've got to be careful about claiming ignorance as an excuse for bad behavior. If a person falls because of sinful actions, we can't blame God for that. But people will. We will blame God for that. Like, how dare you judge me? I didn't know any better. Well, God doesn't really give that to you. He says, no, you needed to come to me. You needed to know there's a better way. I made it possible. I built it into you to know that you need to search for this. The consequences of sin occur to us. So we fall into sin, and then the consequences of sin occur to us, and yet we're to blame for that. But yet people will still try and find a way to blame God for the consequences of their sin. That they take bad actions, and then the bad actions turn out to be bad, and well, then they blame God. How come God, you did this to me or something? And it's like, no, you did it to yourself. We want to deny the consequences or blame God for them, and then there's just no room for that. And so we have verses like this in the Bible, like pay attention, learn, don't depart from this, don't go another way, listen to God. And so in other parts outside of Proverbs, the Bible says things like seek God while he may be found, or seek God with all your heart, and he'll let you find him, or cling to God, or to learn these scriptures and put them on your forehead and on your hands so that you'll never depart from them, figuratively speaking. And so there's this idea of just, the Bible says over and over again, pay attention to this. So when we don't pay attention to it, we really shouldn't. We really can't blame God or anyone else for the consequences that we then face. So to sort of wrap this idea up, it's a fool who spits against the wind and then takes offense at the wind. It's not a wise man that does that. And so too, when we live our lives and we fall into sin, it's the fool who goes into sin and blames God for his actions. We don't want to be that kind of people. We want to instead listen and learn and grow in the Lord. And so that's the devotional today, a little shorter, but that's the devotional for today. Tomorrow, God willing, of course, we will do verse 8, and we'll get talking a little bit about regrets, and we'll start to move into a little section on regrets, and we'll apply that once again also to our marriages. And so God bless you, and have a really great day, and stay in the Lord.